Hello, humanity. Species volume science slash S. It has been abridged since semi ancient times. Control your minds, but free your hearts. Vaccines. I teach us things. This is boxing, martial arts, and wrestling share an identity, and they are about fighting, but they are about fighting by the rules. But they have been abridged since semi ancient times. In the value of that, which is inseparable from all kinds of serious questions with the histories of every modern country and with the sciences of every modern country. Therefore, with the syntax, therefore, with the functionality of the names of the people of the sciences. And this is per science. This is per the science unabridged, which is which is led by that which is hypernative pure, which is that which is hyper simultaneous, that which is the identity to the extent we could discern its identity relationship to itself and the value of that equally, which is what, if we pay attention to it, that's what is equally. So, this is what English was revealed to teach. And before modern religions were even, messengers were even born, already the sciences have become abridged. They had become forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be defended by nature. And the breaching method also knew that. And so it figured out it could force, trick, hurt, and persuade them to defend it by nature tactically wrong as a certain type of victim slash hyper victim, not knowing how to do it properly, but then defending that. And that was propagated. That was exactly what was manifest with those crazy laws against every single human being. Northern colonies and southern colonies before America was a country. This employed negative value nature progressions acts and natures, like misinformation, to employ uses of words like misinformation by either overt criminal enterprises, private ones, three branches of government, the rest of the intelligence tied to them. And before our founders were born, they were all forced to leave, keep secret how individually grouped and together as identities, as names, as systems tactical ulterior from that which is hypernative pure. As that one of the things that makes is also distinct about itself. That which revealed the other species volumes in our own with the same quality aspects in nature. So this scientific distinct identity of simultaneous nature, even if it's only a phenomenon. In other words, you examine it in other words, being an individual is being a sequence slash simultaneous nature. And if you put it in that sequence, that means the species volume. In other words, it's showing us, nature shows us. The other species volumes have individuals of the species body's individual body. And group differences of a species body come with, and the ancients couldn't believe we would forget because it's increasingly demonstrating to us its identity relation. I forgot what, in other words. So what we can do in the world, we have these great hyper negatives. We have war, and then we have the very elements of war themselves, never having been separated. The war, many ways, more so than any member of it, was employed by this breaching method, a hyper archetypal propagation, self cultivated, of criminal insidiousness natures of logic needs in nature's A through Z, where the suburbs were designed tactically denatured before America's founders were even born. This breaching method measured and maintained what they delayed to be given to us to have communicated for our founders and how to communicate about them. We were told to communicate that our founders were the face of James Madison and using his plan. And then they went to seek the first president who was going to agree with the plan. And that just happened to be George Washington. And that plan involved going to counter-extort nowhere and make out of nowhere force to be 13 different locations, a whole bunch of other a whole bunch of other founders. So there's a difference between our founders who were forced to play a shared narrative with people from other colonies that didn't even know and things like that, to rely on them because those breaching laws were checking everyone, all investigations, all investigators, and all vetting of names, reality, perception, all nature. It was collusion with criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatment syntactically too, like with words of truth. Like with a Boolean logic, A therefore B, leaving out the value of exceptions, exception nature. Like what came first, or a finite detail, or what is simultaneously valued. So this breaching method had obligations to know and not to pretend to know. In other words, or to pretend not to know. That things are being blamed on other things, others ourselves. and that's being communicated one way by the schools of New York City, for example, of the suburbs throughout America, let alone the cities, and how Hartford, Connecticut is a suburban/urban, the same way that is like with the pathology, so to speak, of how the suburbs from here to Russia to Ukraine, from America to Russia to Ukraine, across the globe, all exceptions are in demonstration of the same thing. The breaching methods employed consciously, tactically denatured ground its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that as its identity. Because when we would pay attention to this distinct identity of simultaneous nature, for example, because we know that the other species' bodies and humanity, our species, didn't invent how even the bugs have quality aspects. Even fish have eyes, two eyes, qualities, aspects, nature, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneously. Same reason they are a species volume of individuals, a species body of individual bodies, where more and more forever nature is being made, where and how it is difference/hyper difference. And that is the identity of volume that is inseparable from all things, even if you make them up. It's in how that is discernible, is how it is inseparable 3 ways, 1/3/5 ways grouped. But if you pay attention, it's because there are 3 distinct identities of hyper invisible but still discernible. Why and how there are two participle natures, and why and how there's no future participle is relative to this. It is functional. It is grouped its identity of relationship to your identity of relationship to yourself. This is also discernible because cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall slash S simultaneously as appreciation of the gases and their mixture coming in and out, diffusion, simultaneously appreciation of water and its elements coming out, and be everything demonstrated to itself where and how we are itself. But that volume science, hypernative pure, in other words, see president slash chief as 3 volumes. See the slash, the aka the solidus, has more names. It might have 5. On Wikipedia, I read about this. I have to sign up for Wikipedia. There are proofs that they might have gotten pressure shortly after said that because of the nature of, for example, what a predicate act is and is relative to. When they speak about sanctions between America and Russia, for example, with the MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News, a jobs A through Z are at locations A through Z. The same way homes A through Z. We have database relativity to ourselves that was used by human fact treatment nature, torture, extortion, and slavery method before our founders were born. It effectively employed lawyers with their difference, for example, to pretend such is debatable, even though it's not debatable. And to get away with it by saying that's what, and by reading research that says other things. Vaccines. Just because something's written doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's the truth doesn't mean. In other words, I've had debates about things like our founders, and you haven't even, while not being able to discern or to afford anyone to discern how there's a distinction between our founders who had to be counter extorted and had to pretend other too. The ways the breaching method was still entrenched control of all the laws, all the natures of industry. We think, oh, okay, they're going to be a country now. See suits and ties. They had slavery sickly, distinctly through different countries that themselves had already been enslaved, used remotely, individually grouped and together. As systems tactical ulterior from how we are individually grouped and together. And then black pupils. See, there is a concentration of torture sickly distinctly against every single person, but it is sickly non-distinctly too, and that has not been self-valued as means for what to do. Hello. Vaccines.
Frozen.
I'm live right now, mother. It's not frozen.
It's frozen.
I have to vaccine arts. Control our hearts. Control our minds, but free our hearts. Vaccine. It teaches things. I did one halfway YouTube short shadow boxing with a coat on. Wasn't good. I didn't even see it yet. I'll put that up there. But fix the world. This is how we do it. We understand how we can observe how this breaching method uses and used remotely. How people are going to defend the identity names of the sciences as a certain type of victim / hyper victim. Because they had no choice because of what all locations / S were already used for. And I knew it would juxtapose. So the giant nations and can get without when you have to have the money, the people will be working with them as a plant, and where we need money, food from and stuff like that. We have to just give the logistical securities in temporary ways and simultaneously give them means with the border problems in all these powerful countries, because this is how they never had it's relative to it. They're gonna this breaching of the knew they were gonna go up there, suits and ties, counters to it, or and exceptions, whatever it is. Even who made that up or what? How that's the theme. Too, the difference of that. The nature of debate, it has qualities, aspects in nature of criminally foreign influence factor nature, quality aspects in nature to it. Nature as criminal insidiousness slash hypercriminal insidiousness. That nature itself shows us that we need to discern. And this is relative to where and how. Sanctions are written relative to predicate acts. Sanctions are written relative to how relativity slash hyper relativity is increasingly in demonstration to us. And we have people with words like theory, offensively, entrenched, um, semi-conduit to the identity of value slash value progression method, singular, that is hyper foreign, also effectively designed to make and keep all the locations, areas, and states, everyone blaming other things other than themselves, everywhere the species volume is, no matter what country it is, for the real worst causes of negative value, nature progressions, acts, and natures. For example, the need for religious messengers. Sciences have become tactically abridged and self-defended, not realizing those self-defenses syntactically are being used remotely. They're keeping everything. See this. Then they use them remotely. Show them how they use them remotely. The formal voices of the law. Show them how they can blame it on other things other than self. Regarding treatments, they're making police forms because the North and South, the differences between political parties, political party A and B, and exceptions. It is used, entertained, measured, and maintained. You can't defend that and afford to discern how nature uses exceptions, the exception way, nature, those ways known, but also observably hyper additional ways as the value of what came true first. In other words, and there is sickly distinctly how that's still labeled black without the breaching methods roles with it defined, being blamed on things other than themselves, while sickly distinctly manifest our overt slash insidious demonstrations of it. And but that's forced blamed on other things other than themselves by the victims of it. All exceptions in exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of other are in demonstration of the same thing slash S. But we have to follow and allow to have followed mandated law. Because the people who have been speaking about gangs and shootings and guns throughout the country and the world, for example, like regarding New York City. And this is relative. The former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence to Corrupt Organization Act, certain type of victim slash hyper victim, victim predator slash hyper predator, as all formal identities of the law are and have been. Again, relative to understanding this. In other words, they start fights and or self-value them once the people are pretending they're legitimately don't understand the significance of where and how there's a distinction between our founders as those behind the face of James Madison and how we were communicated communicated about it that way. He had that plan to counter extort at 13 locations and force other founders, a distinct nature of founders from the ones that it took to counter extort them. That's one of the reasons they might have been Native Americans. But nature shows us it was Native Americans too, apart with James Madison's plan. Native Americans were fighting with each other for this reason. They had to react to what had been sustained. Since semi-ancient times, humanity's names A through Z, and all grouped different slash S. Increasingly, there's hyper additionally one's apparent motivations for it, and real ones, but for hiding that which is contained with it, which is motivations led by this breaching method. That's keeping everyone self-value roles relative to what's keeping everyone all self-value roles with predicate acts with facts against ourselves. Blame the other things others ourselves. Any voice who tries to note these predicate acts with facts, they have to mention acts. See that the news at locations, areas, and states, all jobs, the people next to them, all the differences between adjacents and conjunctions, their family members, or the people they work with, or their neighbors. That difference is exploited with a factually nature oriented possession slash hyper possession of our countries A through Z. And so the recognizing and being this nature of industry, these natures of industries, these natures of negotiations, they can't afford to be like, they can't afford natures of stability, actual, because they already spoke about stability. Too late. In other words, it's not by accident the kids and adults are shooting each other in New York City. It's not by accident. They have the people with predicate acts with facts roles as only allowed counters. Blame is other things, others ourselves. This breaching method propagated and sustained blame the other things, others ourselves made reliant upon it. Names A through Z, which are hyper additionally names, as in for the voicings of the earth. But again, through its system, using its method of communications and appreciation of it. Not leaving out the smallest finite detail. Not leaving out simultaneous details. Not leaving out that or the value of what came first. See, what leads questions has been used to measure and maintain, not discern, is how the formal identities of the law used words like voting and politics. They were shown that they needed to pretend that was value where it is not, and or make that value bigger than it is and smaller than it is simultaneously, to get over on the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous that each is capable of according with, which shows us how to make evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere, and to stay searching it to make sure it's not a criminal insidious nature of the means, but per its definition of it. So we have a means to draft a statute that each country already agrees with, everybody. So we cannot leave out what is actually recorded are criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents only capable of being based on how modern countries' leaders had other communicated for them, their founders, than they want to communicate it for themselves. Because communications is simultaneously more finite than greater than active relativity. And again, it comes with needs to use. Why and how we are individually group different slash S and species volume. And you needing to be able to be a quality of factual nature, not to leave out the smallest finite detail, let alone grouped and altogether of how each modern country was forced to self-value groupings of humanity, of humanity's names, having only been remembered abridged states of why and how we are humanity, individual, group, different, slash S, as its own system again. Not so person A through Z can write about a book. This is about males, this is about females, this is about, you know what I'm saying? We have a method of answering our questions. See, but this breaching method employed use of different slash S of different slash S. There's shock and awe regarding their roles with transsexual LGBTQ and pronouns on Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN. Different sides and exceptions as collusions with and pretending it's debatable because they have been putting fake evidences in databases with the doctors of these people and at those databases locations with various agencies who remotely send and next to all locations, next to campuses, including fire campuses and medical campuses. And between them, this is a vertical and horizontal manifest method slash S. So forgiveness is to show that people with passions and emotions, all exceptions, in other words, victims are being used remotely. No, we're trying to do legislation. In other words, those locations are being used in the locations next to them. Location slash S. So you need to get them on paper. So they have roles with the same bodies have roles with their sources. All sides in criminal and civil cases, investigators never stopped being used remotely because that was all that was capable of being self-valued or that person was discerned. Use Jane Austen's phrase, sense and sensibilities. Sense. Use the computer's phrase. So we put sensors to sense with computers. In other words, the body senses, emotion sense distinct and or memory, experience senses, and identity senses. Because these are 3 volume sciences, the same way cell, nucleus, cell, body, cell, wall, slash S. I tell best vaccines. So in other words, that's all we have to do is get logistical agreements temporary and set the other exceptions, the other like big countries and or continents as censors. And regarding food needs and values, how much things cost. We don't separate these things from the relativity of how the breaching method uses torture and used torture, extortion, and slavery that we have not been honest about yet. First, we have not been honest about the torture of our original founders, let alone about George Washington. Because don't forget, it was their plan, is the one that is holding up that we were directed to get the Constitution unabridged and demonstrated how the fact that we have rights that are too numerous to list, they're pretending that they don't realize that by pretending to be legitimately involved with instances, descriptions at crime scenes and increasingly at interbranch locations, fabricating transcripts into databases with a whole bunch of other countries too, keeping the blame of it because they never had possession of their names. Because before each modern country's founders were born, there were intelligence agencies that were already collusions. With that, with the difference of that, too, or overt criminals, private ones, insidiousness of A through Z. only capable of being for those crazy laws. What were witch trials about? Witch trials are about the predicate acts with facts method. Even if they were made up, that's what it was about. That one that was slavery was about. That one that the torture, extortion, slavery of our founders was about. Simply distinctly from the first president who agreed to help force the plan to get us told to get the Constitution unabridged. So New Britain Superior Court has rules with sexual harassment, identity theft, fraud, slander, and with their sources and family members and people next to their houses since they were kids. So the whole, and this is intercity. This is inter-services, all differences here. So in other words, all the countries in the news with nuclear weapons pointed at each other. They have natures of negotiations where they have collusions with each other, like with psychiatry. For example, tactically delusions wrought. What's slavery about? Get them on paper, one name in sequence, because these are people involved with New York City, involved with Connecticut. Every year, they're using time. They're lying about what they think about time, and they've been putting fake phone conversations, fake emails, fake kid conversation with me as a kid with the police in the police station. I never went in the police station to have a conversation with them in my life when they had my fingerprints. In other words, and they did this with the news too. Attached me to fake conversations with them about the World Trade Center. I was in the court right next to it that day, right before the World Trade Center court. I was in the Ninth Circuit Court. They put names on both sides of the cases there in the interstates, the same ones involved. Interstates, the same ones involved internationally. People associated with the international business program, associated with so what was his name?